Okay, guys, welcome to Handling Nerves. One of the things that we're going to be talking about today is not just managing your nerves and coping through things, but actually understanding why we have nerves in the first place, which types of nerves are we experiencing that are helpful, what's hurtful, and how do we manage our physiology and our emotions and thoughts throughout the duration of a competition. Because we can't just get rid of nerves, and they actually are very helpful for us. So keep an open mind today in terms of what you might want to think about trying or exploring to better understand your nerves in how they relate to your competition in dog sports. So to get started, we're going to talk about what's actually happening in your body and your head when we experience nerves. So nerves, anxiety, and a feeling of anxiousness are all the same thing. So we're going to use those throughout as synonyms. So if I talk about nerves, or I talk about anxiety, or I talk about being anxious, you can imagine a similar feeling, and that feeling is being worried or concerned about the unknown or unknowable of the future. That's one of the things that makes nerves and anxiety so hard, is because we are looking ahead or even drawing from past experiences that are causing us this state of feeling out of control and feeling very physically or emotionally overwhelmed. This experience can include a very wide range of emotions. We can be nervous and frustrated at the same time. We can be nervous and sad, or nervous and insecure at the same time. And we can have a very wide range of thoughts and physiological reactions to whatever our perceived stressor is. Hi, go ahead and just grab a seat. So one of the things we want to think about when we think about our own nerves is understanding that nervousness often comes from how we evaluate the difficulty of a task and what our perceived abilities are. The more difficult I perceive a task to be, the more likely it is that I'm going to perceive my abilities to fall short of that, right? Which means I have less control over the outcome, and my anxiety or my nerves are going to get worse. So how we assess our tasks that we're doing, whether that is a specific skill in your sport or the entire performance overall, how we evaluate that task and how we think we've actually prepared ourselves, right? Do we trust our training? Do we trust our dog? Do we trust our handling, right? Do our perceived abilities meet the demands of this task or not, right? Very often, if we feel if our mental abilities, right? I don't trust myself to stay calm. I don't trust my dog to keep his head together. Or our physical abilities, I don't know on an agility course if I can get down that line. I don't know whether my dog's going to be too tired by the end of this competition to still perform their best. If I'm doubting any of those things, it's very likely that my stress levels are going to go way up because I focused on all the things I don't have control over, and my nerves are going to be more detrimental to my performance in the long term. So when we're talking about nerves, one of the things that we want to think about is how hard is the task that I'm doing, and in what ways can I manipulate my understanding of that task difficulty, right? There's lots of things in competition settings that are new and novel and going to be stressful. But there's also a lot of things that you do in practice that you work on every single week that you probably spend a lot of time reinforcing and rewarding for your dog and for yourself by getting positive repetitions in. And if I can draw my focus to what about the situation is the same as practice, what about the situation have I already invested in, right? What skills do I really trust instead of all of the things that I don't trust or the things that I'm not sure about? That simple shift in focus from looking at the event or a competition as a whole from I'm so worried about all the things that could go wrong to I'm so excited for all the things that are going to go right, because there's lots of things our dogs do every single weekend that are fantastic, right? That if we draw our attention to, number one, we're going to have a more positive competition experience overall. And number two, we're actually giving ourselves a major benefit by reducing the amount of stress we're experiencing, because I'm changing my perception of the task difficulty, right? And when we're looking at that, we want to think about changing our mindset around the competition setting and what we're really getting out of it. A lot of people go into competitions and they put this weight on themselves, which we're actually going to talk about in a little bit, which is where is that stress coming from, right? Because I don't think anybody in dog sports is being told that they have to compete to maintain a $10 million contract, right? That would be a lot of pressure. So where's the pressure that we're putting ourselves coming from? Because most of us don't earn an income from agility. And even then, even our instructors, even our coaches, I know all of you that are students, do not look at your instructor badly if they have an NQ on a weekend, right? You wouldn't look at somebody's dog missing a week entry or knocking a bar and going, oh, I'm never training with them. That was their entire reputation. It's out the window, right? And yet somehow we managed to put that feeling, that level of stress, that amount of weight on ourselves all the time in competition, right? And very often it's because our mind is focused on what's out of my control, what's uncertain, what could go wrong, right? If I flip that and we go into competition saying, what are the things that my dog's going to do right? What are the things I'm excited for? That could be spending time with people. That can be enjoying your time with your dog, getting extra walks in. It's a really nice day outside. All of the reasons why we do dog sports in the first place, right? It's because it's enjoyable. For most of us, it's our hobby. It should be the best part of the week, not the dreaded part of the week where you go into it emotionally drained already because you've been worrying for the last 3 days. And you go into it and leave emotionally and physically depleted because you spent so much energy being nervous during the competition, right? That's what we're trying to get away from, because I know how exhausting it is to be really anxious throughout a 12-hour trial day, right? We are burning up a lot of extra energy, and kind of, a lot of people end up kind of tainting their experience with dog sports, right? Where they get so wrapped up in the nerves, they get so wrapped up in the outcome and feeding off those negative emotions that come when we freak ourselves out, have a bad run, and then there's the evidence that we can't do this, and it becomes a vicious cycle, right? A lot of people get stuck there. What we're trying to do is shift away from that, right? I don't care whether I qualify. I don't care whether I get a winning score. I don't care whether my students qualify or they get a winning score. I had a student ask me not too long ago if they would ever embarrass me at a competition. And I told them very honestly, the only way that you can embarrass me at a competition is if you are nasty to your dog, right? Which I know a lot of us feel the same way, right? If we watch someone have a mistake, we watch someone have a disastrous run, somebody's dog poops in the middle of the ring. We don't look at that person and go, oh, wow, they're a bad ham, right? They're bad for dog sports. We don't like that person, right? That shame and embarrassment and guilt that would get you shunned from the community. We don't feel that way about any of those mistakes, because we've all been there. A lot of people do feel that way if you see someone being absolutely nasty to their dog. That's the type of thing that changes our relationship with how we see someone, right? That's how we tank someone's reputation, right? But very often we put that weight, people are going to judge us that hard on all these other little mistakes that are really inconsequential in the big picture, right? So we're trying to shift our mindset from looking for all the things that can go wrong to looking for all the things that do and can go right for us in a dog show weekend, right? Beyond just the results, the whole experience, right? Because you're in the ring for maybe a few minutes every day, but we're there for 12 hours, right? We have to make sure that that's a positive experience for ourselves. So let's talk about where some of those nerves come from. So when we talk about sources of competition stress, do keep in mind that we're not necessarily addressing any stress that might be coming from other areas of your life, right? For example, there are a lot of agility coaches or instructors for dog sports, or trainers who show in dog sports on the side, but dog training is their main business, right? There is some pressure from your occupation placed on your performance, right? So that might be another really interesting thing to look at if you're in that particular role where you are an instructor, trainer, or coach, and you also compete, right? We're not going to touch on that type of stress. We're also not going to touch on any stress that might be coming from mental health issues, right? If we're really struggling with depression or anxiety, right, or we have social anxiety, or even have just struggled in the past with public speaking, or had negative sporting experiences where maybe when we were a kid in a different sport, a coach was really nasty to us, right? And we might have specific feelings or emotional reactions or physical reactions to our coach watching us in particular, right? There might be some specific associations people have due to their past or due to mental health issues they're dealing with currently. We're not going to touch on those sources either, but we do want to be aware throughout the trial day, right? When you start to feel that pang of anxiety, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to notice that and what anxiety building really feels like and how to identify those symptoms and what is changeable and what we need to just kind of work through. But when we feel that feeling of anxiety come up, where is it coming from, right? Pausing and kind of saying, why do I feel the way that I feel in this moment? And can we identify a specific stressor, right? Maybe it's one of these sources that we're going to look at, and maybe it's something else that I'm dragging into dog sports that doesn't necessarily have to be here, right? Or maybe that's something that I wasn't even aware was impacting me that way, that now we can deal with and address and make better, right? So definitely keep that in mind as we go through these sources. If there's anything that comes to mind that isn't up on this list, or if in your next dog show experience, right, you take a moment, pause, and reflect on that a little bit as you go throughout your day. So the first type of competition stress we're going to talk about is event importance, right? This is something that everyone can relate to. How important we believe a competition to be, the more stress we're going to place on ourselves, right? Just a natural reaction for us. If it really matters to us, that's where that anxiety is going to come from. Now, that can be a really good thing sometimes, right? Some of us have our best performances when that type of pressure is placed on us. It can also be really, really distracting and detrimental for some of us. And it doesn't really matter whether this is a national specialty or a world team tryouts event, or if it's your first mock. It could be your first dog show ever that causes this much stress, because it's how we perceive importance, right? So even if it's not something that is viewed by the community as this is a really important event, it's the event of the year, we can still be experiencing stress from event importance, even if that's something as simple as my coach is watching me now, or you have family come to the show for the first time and you really want to show them how cool this dog sport thing is that you spend so much time doing, right? And your dog's already acting a goof because the family's there, right? And that's distracting for them, right? I see that all the time, especially with novice dogs, right? Because we want to share that with people that we know. And that can be a type of event importance, because we're not necessarily concerned about them judging us because it's our family, it's our close friends, but we are really worried about making this the best experience possible, or really showing all of our skills that we have, right? A really good example of event importance in agility is mock runs, because a mock is 20 double Qs. So when we get to that mock run, either that last double Q or the last half of that double Q number 20, what we often see is people get stuck and they can't get that last double Q for the longest time, which when you really think about it, it's kind of ridiculous because you've already done it 19 times, right? But it really is very funny. And a lot of people will be on like a hot streak where they're getting, a double Q every weekend going up to their mock, and then they get to 19 and a half, 4, 5, 6 times in a row, right? And every time we do that, people double down on the stress, right? Where it's like the next one becomes increasingly more important. So by drawing awareness to like this type of competition stress, one of the things we can do is rationalize for ourselves a little bit, right? Get some more perspective, because we're zoomed in on this moment, right? This competition, this day, this run is the end all be all. And that is simply not true, right? I always tell people that if it doesn't matter in 5 years, we're not going to spend 5 minutes on it. And if we think about life from that perspective, when it comes to dog sports, everything we do now is for no one but us. I have a student who got a puppy related to my world championship dog. And she told me before she got the puppy, I don't know if I should take this puppy because I don't know if I can do agility to the level that this puppy could, right? She didn't think that she could live up to the potential of this dog, right? She was placing a load of importance on this dog's genetic background, who it was related to, which a lot of us do. And what I told her was, nobody except for me 30 years from now is going to remember what Whimsy ever did. 10 years from now, People maybe will remember Whimsy, people who like knew me when Whimsy was alive back then. All of my new students, they might hear about her in passing conversations or in a specific example I share, right? But it doesn't act, none of what we did actually matters, right? It's some of the most important moments in my life, but they're not important moments for pretty much anybody else, right? So a perspective shift, this is really important. Well, it's really important to me, but it's not really important to everyone else how this run goes, right? Or taking a shift and saying, remembering, why are we doing dog shows? Why am I here? Why did I spend all year campaigning, spending thousands of dollars, right? That's a bill that we never want to tally up. We looked at everything we invest in the dogs. That's like the number no one wants to know, right? Because we invest so much in it, right? It's the hours, the money, the miles on the road, right? It's really important only to us, right? And remembering, why is it important to us, right? Chances are you didn't get into dog sports going, wow, they have really cool trophies, right? Or that payout is awesome, right? I know no one said that because none of our dog sports pay out, right? They don't. I guess in confirmation, you can at Westminster win a decent bit of money, but it certainly doesn't, make a dent in what we spent to get to that point, I'm sure. So when we're thinking about all of this, how do we detach from the importance of this and remind ourselves it's important to us because we love spending time with our dog, or because we want to show everyone how amazing our dog is, or we just want to go out there and feel connected and flowing, and whatever happens, happens, right? How can I shift my understanding of the importance of this event in a way that's going to benefit? Now, if you're someone who feeds off of event importance, which there are some people who do, right? Those are like the crunch time workers. They wait to the last minute to write essays, right? And they thrive on it. That's their best writing comes at the last minute, right? Yeah. Right. Some of those people might not find this to be detrimental, and that's something we want to keep in mind too, right? Not all sources of stress are negative sources of stress. Some of this is going to be positive pressure, right? We're actually going to get to that in some of our next ones. So the next type of competition stress we're going to talk about is level of uncertainty, right? The more unknown surrounding your performance, the more likely we're to experience nerves. Now, for some people in agility, this could be the unknown challenges on course, right? For some of us, this could be not knowing how many smells are in the trial environment that we're doing, or we don't know what the lighting is going to be like, or what the footing is going to be like. Is my dog going to slip, right? Not knowing what we should do to help the dog if we end up with a dog that's slipping, right? Or trialing under an unfamiliar judge, right? Not knowing how they call faults, not knowing how strict they are with some of the criteria, not knowing if they're really fussy about timing, right? All of those things, not understanding how people are going to react, not understanding what's the most predictable thing that's going to happen next, causes us naturally as humans to be anxious, rightfully so, because so much of our perceptual processing is devoted to anticipation. I want to know how someone's going to react so that I can prepare to be ready for whatever that reaction is, right? Or when we're driving, right? Chances are you're scanning the road because you want to know whether the person who just pulled up next to you is going to try to cut you off, right? You're actively preparing, you're drawing your attention to that thing to anticipate, right? But when we're in a situation where I can't possibly anticipate what a judge is going to do, right? There's no way for me to, unless we spend copious amounts of time online stalking them and watching video of them, which would be excessive, I think, right? Right. But unless we went to those lengths of like watching game tape of a judge, we're not going to know what they're going to do, right? So there is some level of having to detach, and we're actually going to talk about how we get away from being overwhelmed by the level of uncertainty at events. And that's one of the strategies we're going to talk about in terms of shifting away from an anxious state and getting to a state that's more within our control. So we can choose what to focus on, choose what to invest in energy. Because the large problem with level of uncertainty is we spend so much time and energy worrying. And worrying is a really tricky beast because it makes us feel like we're in control because we're dealing with it. We're working on it, we're processing it, we're actively using it, right? we're not actually doing anything. We're just spinning our gears, right? And, tossing that idea around over and over and over again, or even maybe building out those worst case scenarios into something that's more dramatic, because our brains are so creative when they really want to be, right? We can take something as simple as, oh God, my dog's gonna knock a bar, to what if they knock a bar, break their leg, and their agility career is over. And now I'm super anxious. And I cannot for certain in agility tell you that that would never happen, because that is not necessarily true. It's highly, highly unlikely. But there is that level of uncertainty. I can't say for sure that your dog won't get hurt, right? A broken leg would be severe, but they could sprain a toe, right? They could rip a nail. It happens all the time, right? They could take a bad spill, knock a rib out of place, and they're done for the day. They're not injured for weeks at a time, right? But there is always that level of uncertainty, right? Injury is always a possibility, and that's very often where I see people get hung up on level of uncertainty, is potential injuries for their dogs, because we care about our dog's well-being, but we don't have ultimate control over whether Fluffy stays safe or not. And if you have a Fluffy like mine who is suicidal, that anxiety level goes up. I've had 2 of those now, and watching your dog who does not care fling themselves at obstacles is really anxiety producing, right? Or having one of those dogs that you don't know what dog you're getting when you step to the line, right? Seen lots of those dogs where sometimes they're on, they give you 110%, they're ready to go, and sometimes they walk in the ring with that look of it's not happening today, and you're like, oh boy, now I have to switch to a totally different handling plan to get anything out of this dog, right? That can cause people a lot of uncertainty stepping to the line, right? And unfortunately, that spike in stress does not help that type of dog, right? So level of uncertainty is something we want to pay attention to, especially if we feel like we're getting hung up on the unknown and unknowables, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about how to deal with those. The last type of competition stress we're going to talk about is from confidence, right? Which we already talked a little bit in terms of assessing task difficulty, right? How hard do I think this is going to be for me, right? Or how hard do I think this is going to be for me and my dog? When we think about confidence, a lot of it has to do with our self-perception, right? And when it comes to dog sports or any human animal sport, right? This could be equestrian as well. What we're looking at is self-efficacy, my belief in myself, and other efficacy, my belief in my dog. There are lots and lots of handlers who think that they are fabulous, but they do not believe in their dog at all, right? They talk really negatively about their dog. Every time their dog makes a mistake, they say things like, this is so typically you, right? Or I knew you were going to do that. There's no trust there, right? That can also undermine confidence. More often than that, though, we see the person saying those things about themselves, right? Where they come off the run saying, I'm a terrible handler. I never get to my crosses on time, right? Or they say things like, my dog could be so amazing. They could be on world team. They could be a national champion. They could go to that event if only they had a better handler. Yes, right? It's a lot of us. It's true. And it's a really hard thought to get away from. But what are we doing? We're saying, well, I don't believe in myself to take my dog to that place, right? That potential. So building confidence and knowing where we draw confidence from and how to boost our confidence in the moment, really important skill if struggling with confidence, either in yourself, in your handling plan, or in your dog, something that we want to be addressing actively all the time. One of the things that a sports psychologist that I listen to all the time says is elite athletes do one thing really well. They remember their training. They don't change anything at the last minute. And very often there are handlers who have this plan in mind. They know what they trained. They know what works. And they get to the last minute and that pang of self-doubt says, I don't know if this is going to work, right? I can't be 100% certain that this is going to work. And I'm going to change everything. So when you get out of the ring and your coach looks at you and says, what was that? And you're like, I don't know. I panicked, right? Because at the last second, we didn't have enough confidence to just stick with what we know and see whether it pays off. Because those are all the things that we've been training or investing in, right? When we think about our confidence, one of the things that we want to do is be able to draw on past experiences of what worked for me before, right? Past experiences of even handling a challenge that was similar to this in the past, right? It doesn't have to be exact, doesn't even have to be this dog, doesn't even have to be the same sport, right? That could be as simple as I was in a soccer tournament when I was 10 and I handled the pressure. As a 10-year-old, I handled the pressure, right? And just giving yourself, David Goggins, who is an ex-military guy, and he has a lot of books, very tough attitude, but he has a concept that he calls the cookie jar. And his cookies are all those hard things that he's done in the past, right? Whether they're exactly this type of challenge or whether it's exactly this sport or exactly this event or this teammate, doesn't really matter, right? His cookie jar is just all the hard things that he's done in the past. And when he has a moment of, I don't know if this is going to work, what he does is he reaches in the cookie jar and he pulls out one of those past memories. And when we do that, when we actually give ourselves the opportunity to remember something fully enough to feel those sensations again of like the intense gratitude for your dog, or really remembering the joy and like the euphoria of finishing that performance, right? And playing with your dog afterward and just like knowing that you gave 110%. What we're telling you is, what you're telling yourself is, I'm capable of giving my best effort, right? Some of those best memories might not have been wins, right? Some of those best memories might not have even been a qualifying score in your sport, but maybe it's the first time that you competed at that higher level, or it's the first time that your dog worked successfully in a new environment, right? And you got to see all of your hard work, all of the training kind of come together, even if that was just for one skill, right? We can find a lot of pride and joy and subsequently confidence in those past memories. And we can do the same thing with memories from non-dog sports as well, right? So don't limit yourself. If you're looking at it and you're like, I'm a total newbie in my sport, or this dog is so different from the last dog, I can't even comprehend. You know, I had a 24-inch Doberman before, and now I have an 8-inch Papillon, and the sport is completely different. And you don't feel like you can compare. Choose something beyond that, right? What else have you done in your life? There's lots and lots of things, if we look, that we can draw confidence from, right? When we think about altering our confidence, we also want to keep in mind that we're trying to remember that we trained for this, that we prepared, right? A lot of confidence is trusting your preparation and defining success for yourself, because we will never have confidence if our confidence in our capabilities is determined by the results after the fact, right? If you feel like absolute crap all day long until you have your run, and you do your run, and then you're like, oh, wow, we nailed that, I feel great, right? Well, you only got confidence because of the immediate evidence that was coming before you, right? So we have to wait until we get that validation, and sometimes we don't get the validation, right? And then we end up in that vicious cycle that we talked about earlier. One of the things we want to do is notice when the confidence isn't there and reach for some before we have to perform, because there's absolutely no benefit to feeling less confident going into performance. I don't care if the performance goes terribly. There's still no benefit. You could be completely shit out of luck, right? Like there's no way my dog's going to focus in this environment, right? Lots of us have been there where you just look at your baby dog and they are overwhelmed, right? And sometimes we just have to say, you know what? It is what it is. We are as prepared for this moment as we were going to be. Let's just see what happens. I'm curious. This is a learning moment and I know it, right? That is still better than going in the ring completely wigged out because we're so nervous and we don't trust our training. We don't trust anything we did, right? Now, all of our hormones, our physiology, my thoughts are all in the wrong place. My dog's probably feeding off of that quite a bit. And I'm not giving my dog my absolute best effort because I'm really distracted by all of these feelings and thoughts about nerves, right? So as we go through some of the things we're talking about today, think about where these sources of competition stress come into play, because sometimes it's not all at the same time. The timing of stress is actually really interesting because it's different for every person. Some people feel stress 3 days before, right? Or for a lot of people, the night before, right? Especially if it's anything that's compounding in this way, right? It's a really tough competition, so my confidence is lacking. I've never been to this venue. I've never competed on this judge before, so there's uncertainty, and it's a national specialty, right? This is the event of the year. We have all of these things compounding, right? What we might find is the night before, I get really stressed even just anticipating going into this event, right? And same is true for local competitions too, right? Like I said, all of this is subjective. We can do this to ourselves any point in time. We're really good at it. What we want to think about is, when do I feel stressed, so that we can start to prepare you for it, right? Because if I know that 8 p.m. rolls around the night before an event and my brain hits red alert mode, right? I really wish I did one more training session. I could have rewarded that when we're at the building. I'm thinking about all the things that I had, that I could have done, that I didn't do, that I should have done, right? Which makes me feel guilty, doesn't help my confidence at all, right? And I'm doubling down on the fact that I'm not getting good sleep tonight. And as somebody who cares very deeply about your brain health, I will let you know that sleep is really important for all sorts of things. For regulating our emotions, sleep is important. For regulating our physiology, sleep is important. For having full use of your mental faculties, like your memory, your coordination, your ability to maintain your attention and concentrate, all of those things that we really, really want to be working when we get into the ring, we need sleep for, right? So if day before the event is your stress time, right? And that's where you peak stress right there, right? And then the actual competition doesn't seem that bad actually once you're there, kind of thing. Lots of people have that experience where they peak really early and then they kind of come down and they're like, oh, I forgot I actually kind of like dog shows, right? I got myself all really worried there, and not for a good reason. This was enjoyable. My friends are here. My coach was really supportive. My dog did well, go figure, right? If we peak really early, what we want to start thinking about is, before that happens, what could we be doing, right? And we're gonna talk about some strategies. What could we be doing before I get that stressed, right? Same thing with as we go throughout the competition day, right? Some people wake up in the morning and their stomach is not so bad that they don't eat or drink anything until 4 p.m, right? Also not helpful. We're gonna talk about food and hydration a little bit as well. But really early in the morning, am I getting super stressed? Or is it we get to my class and that's it gets real, right? We're like, oh no, we're up next. I don't know if I'm ready. I was watching this whole time and I thought that I might be ready, but now that it's time to go in the ring, now it's time for my performance, I'm not ready anymore, right? So noticing, when does stress hit? For some people, it's even after the competition, right? They finish their performance and then they get hit with this wave of, I wonder what people thought, or I wonder if that looked good, or they had something happen in the ring that they genuinely are a little embarrassed about, that I felt really vulnerable to watch their dog make that mistake, or they did a mistake that they would consider to be stupid or wrong, something like that, right? And now we have anxiety hitting us after the fact because of what people will think, or of how this experience is going to impact our future experiences in the ring. Is my dog going to remember that I stepped on their foot, they screamed really loud, right? Now I'm stressed about that going forward. Right, so paying attention as we go along about, when do you think stress is hitting you? We want to be able to have things pre-planned before we get to that point of peak anxiety that we've intercepted ourselves with, and at least tried to mitigate that stress response overall, right? We don't want to get to a point of being dysfunctional, where your brain goes foggy and life just happens and you get to the end of it and you're like, wow, I really wish I had more control throughout that performance or throughout the trial day, right? I wish I'd been more present and was able to do things differently, because when I look back, I see so many places where I could have done things better, right? And now I feel regretful because I let my emotions or my nerves get out of control. So when we think about how nerves are experienced, we have one of two general experiences, and very often people have a blend of these as we go through. We can either have nerves that are thoughts or nerves that we experience as physical sensations. So our mental nerves are our thoughts and emotions about upcoming events and the potential outcomes of those events. This can be thoughts about dotting your handling, worrying about opinions from breeders, trainers, other competitors, the person across the country who's owns the sibling of your dog who's doing the same sport, and they're, doing that thing where people like to pit the puppies in the litter against one another, right? Can add a lot of stress for people, even people who don't care about that thing when they buy the puppy, right? Sometimes the environment we're in creates the situation where I'm having a more severe nervous reaction than I would have, right, without that relationship. We're gonna talk a little bit about that as well. Right, this can also be us projecting into the future and wondering what's gonna happen, right? Level of uncertainty. We also have physical nerves. So the physical bodily sensations that we have in reaction to nerves, a lot of these aren't necessarily controllable. And if you're like me, you very likely have a mix of these nerves throughout your trial day, right? So one of the things I find really interesting about how our arousal shifts, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about this in regards to our dogs as well. One of the interesting things is there for everyone is a progression of these things. It might start in your body, it might start in your head, but there's some sort of escalation, because we don't go from I feel totally fine to I'm trembling at the knees, I really have to pee, it's 1 minute before I go in the ring, and it doesn't happen like that. We don't, 2 dogs out, we're not like, I feel great, and then the next moment we're just done, right? Unless you have panic attacks, and then maybe, but that's a different lecture. When we're talking about this type of escalation, there is noticeable symptoms that if we're paying attention to it, it's very likely that we can find that very first thought or that very first feeling that is leading into this more severe reaction, right? Because if I asked you if you take a moment to reflect back on your last competition where you really felt nervous about your performance, very likely you're going to remember that peak anxiety feeling of like when all of these things are coming together at the same time, right? You're weak at the knees, you're trembling in your boots, and you can't stop thinking about that off-course hump, or you can't stop thinking about the fact that this judge, doesn't judge well for this breed, or the spacing of the coursing and agility or something like that, right? Where everything's compounding at the same time. That's very often the feeling of anxiousness that people describe to me. It's not the pang of anxiety they felt in the parking lot when they rolled up, right? And that's the moment of the parking lot. That's where the mental skills would be so helpful, because we're giving ourselves a challenge that's not that hard, right? Calm yourself down a little bit. You're at like a 4. We need you to come back down to a 2, right? We're in the parking lot. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to be at 9 or a 10 where we feel dysfunctional, right? Our brain is not operating at max capacity in that state either. When we're really over aroused and far too anxious for whatever we're doing, it's going to be hard for us even to knock on the door and say, I think something else might be better right now than freaking out, right? It's going to be hard to even get that thought in because our brain is already wigged out, right? We're already checked out. We're not in the present moment enough to regain control of ourselves. So we want to be able to track some of these feelings back to what do we think the first thought or feeling is that's kind of causing this domino effect for us as we get closer to our performance, or we get closer to that peak stress time, right? So if this is the day before, right, we want to be thinking about this as well, right? When throughout the day, is it when I get off work and like that part of my life ends and now it's time to get ready for the dog show, and that driving home and I start thinking about it, and that's where this all starts? That, if I was really honest with myself, that's my first self-doubt thought, right? Is 4 p.m. on Friday. I'm already thinking about how tomorrow is not going to go well, right? And then by the time I get to 8 p.m., we're at that 9 or 10, right? Where now it's really hard to help ourselves. So for those of you who are here, or those of you who are online, if you want to participate too, are there any thoughts that we have? We have an example. Fantastic. I don't know how to get to chat. Is this it? Okay, I'm gonna read it aloud. Oh, you guys can read it. Yeah, I'm gonna read it out loud anyway. I have noticed at AKC Jumper Standard, I am most overstressed, lack of confidence, and tend to not have good timing with cues. However, time to meet your premiere, I do better because I'm not so weird. At CPE has been an eye opener. Just fun, no stress, way better performance because time and cues. I realize it's my overstress missing with my cues. Lucy is just fast, but I can do it. Yes, you can. Good, positive. Can is a really strong word. We don't want to use soft language, right? Like, I think I can do it. Don't qualify the statement, right? I can do it is a really positive statement. Unwinding a little by reframing the run. Absolutely. That is a great example. Any examples of where we feel like this might be starting for us? Any thoughts that you guys have either here in the crowd or online of what is this first stress moment for me? Right? Is it about a certain piece of equipment? Is it about who's going to be there? Is it way before the event actually happens? For some people, it's when they enter the event. If it's like a national event or something like that, or your first show, sometimes people get a huge spike in anxiety even when they submit the entry and they send it off and they're like, oh God, we're doing this, right? Makes me feel that way. I feel that way when I have to travel across the country. I'm like, oh God, it's 20 hours in the car. That's a commitment, right? That event importance. I'm spending 3 days in the car to do this, right? Any thoughts on where this might be starting for us? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anticipating. So the example, because I'm not sure how good the volume is. The example was packing to go to our trial and having that sensation or feeling of, I don't want to forget something, or, ooh, I really need to remember to bring that extra toy or that extra leash or a raincoat, even though it's an indoor event, just in case, right? It's indoors on turf, but I'm going to bring a raincoat, rain boots, the umbrella, all of that stuff, extra towel, dry the dog off. Hat and gloves. Yep. It's going to be 80 degrees, but I'm going to pack everything just in case. I might be cold in the building. Who knows? Right. That is a great example. Especially because that type of you're trying to solve problems that haven't happened yet, right? By like overpacking or over preparing, right? And I think one of the things that we can do there for shifting the mindset a little bit is saying, okay, what else do you do in preparation for an event that you've already done and kind of like closed, right? The last training session, the reinforcement, taking care of your dog, making sure they go to the chiropractor, they got a rest day today, those kind of things, right? And say, oh, look at all the things I have done already that have prepared me for this moment, right? Rather than what might go wrong tomorrow that I still have to prepare for and overtaxing yourself. I also do that. And then I wake up the next morning and I'm like, oh God, what were all the things I said yesterday? Yeah, and then he has to do it. Yeah, it's usually how my mornings go before trials. Right? Actually, my mom has a really great saying for that. My mom also does dog agility and has my entire life, just for context, for those of you who don't know Diane. And when we first started going overseas for big events, we had that, you don't have your car. Oh my gosh, the things that we have in our car as dog people is incredible. Right? And the first few times we went overseas, we overpacked things so badly that we had extra suitcases. And I was like, I don't think we ever opened that. We didn't need a single thing that was in that. And we got to a point of that my mom eventually said, if we're investing to go to these events, I'm going to pack everything that we know that we need. And if an emergency comes up, I just have that few $100s put aside for, I will deal with it when I have to deal with it. Right? Because something always happens at some point throughout your career in dog sports, right? Where the car dies or you forgot to pack you forgot dog food. My gosh, people forget dog food all the time. Happens, right? But if we're anxiously just spinning our wheels about all the things that might go wrong, it's a lot harder than saying, I have a plan in place, right? Or I have resources, I have time, I have a support person who's going to help me deal with these things if they happen. And just saying, I have this contingency plan set up for whatever this is, and I will deal with it when it happens. Right? And just giving yourself that freedom of, I don't have to plan for everything. Right? We could always go buy REI's up the road. right? If you were having a trial here, just go buy a coat, right? Life would go on, right? Now you have an extra coat. Any other examples of, someone in the chat? Driving to the trial and then start line stress just before we go in. Yeah. So Lisa, if you don't mind sharing, what does that stress feel like? Is it specific thoughts? Is it a specific sensation?
Oh gosh, well, everything, like
any other thoughts?
like a little bit of
either
manifesting of everything that's
Lisa's talking.
Can you hear me?
My volume's not on. Escape.
Can you hear me? No.
Escape's not working.
Hello?
There we go.
Lisa, we try.
I got, can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Driving to the trial, I'm gonna be late. I'm gonna miss the first run. I forgot something, you know, going through the checklist in my mind. And then is there gonna be a place, am I gonna get there in time to find a good place to create where we can have a good visual and in and out to get to the start line. And then of course, just as we get closer to the time to go, getting more and more anxious, like pacing around, having to go to the bathroom, worried about, because I mean, I have a border collie who does not like to stay at the start line. She just wants to go. And so that's one of our issues. So it's just all about trying to stay calm, because the calmer I am, obviously the calmer she is at the start line, but she knows what's about to happen. So the more nervous she gets, the more nervous I get.
Of course. Yes. Okay, so we'll mute that. Great example. I really appreciate the detail you went into there and kind of how that builds up, right? So starting with the anxiousness of, am I going to be there on time? And is there going to be enough space? How long does it take to get to the ring? Those types of thoughts. And when it comes to timing kind of ties into that level of uncertainty, especially around dog shows where we might be running ahead of schedule. Like 9 times out of 10, we're running behind schedule. But the one time we're running ahead of schedule is the time that we all worry about. I'm the same way. Even when I know that I've left for a trial with plenty of time before you get there, you just have that thought. And very often what I tell people to do, if timing of things or worrying if we're going to have enough time or worrying that I'm going to take too much time to do something, like for example, if I have a dog that's particular about their energy level before I take them in the ring, if I get them out too early, they're going to be exhausted by the time we go in. If I get them out too late, they're not going to be calm enough before I go in the ring. Right? A lot of people are playing that game of how do I manage my dog's energy level, which we're going to talk about too. If I have a timing issue, what I want to do is put a stopwatch on it. How long does it actually take me to do my warm up? Because then I know that I have enough time, right? I have estimates from over the years of doing agility of how long it takes a dog to go through a jumpers course or a standard course. I'm sure those of you who do competitive obedience know how long a routine takes in novice versus a routine in utility, or how long it takes a class of 10 dogs to go through the conformation ring, right? If you don't know how long those things take, because you've either never really paid attention to like down to the minute or seconds for some of our sports like agility or rally where it is going by really fast, take a stopwatch to it. On average, time 10, 15 dogs. On average, how long does it take someone to go from the ring gate, start line, leash off, do their run, catch their dog at the end, leash back on, get the buckles all in the harness, put that together, and get out of the ring, right? How long does that full process take? Because we're talking about getting your dog ready, or how long do I have till I should go get my dog from the car, right? Or if I'm at a national event where the timing becomes more particular because I have a 10-minute walk back across this giant facility to get my dog from the RV, that's a different game, right? We want to be keeping that in mind about how does that come into my normal routines and my normal timing. If I don't know my normal timing, it makes it really hard to adjust for new locations, bigger events in different areas, right? Where things are going to be a little bit different. So by time all of our base things at local shows, how long does it take one dog to complete their performance? right? So that I can have an accurate estimate of it usually takes, I usually want to get my dog out 12 dogs before. That's about 15 minutes if we time it in jumpers or something like that, right? And I've timed my warm up and I know that my warm up takes 12 minutes from start to finish, right? So I have a 3-minute buffer there that I'm going to be at the ring for about the last 3 or 4 dogs before I go. And that's the perfect routine for me, right? Well, now I don't have to worry about it because I know how much time it takes. I know what I'm using to judge how long the class is going to run. And I've eliminated a lot of decisions I have to make throughout the day. Like those of us who walk back to the ring repeatedly to check to see where they are, right? Or those of us who get our dogs out way too early and end up waiting for 30 minutes because we way over anticipated how fast the class was going to go by. So taking a stopwatch to a lot of those things is really helpful. We have our baseline of how long does it take me to do things, right? How long does it take me to casually walk from here to the car, right? How long does it usually take my dog to go potty, right? I have one dog who it takes easily 8 minutes. It's a commitment to get her to pee. She's so excited to go inside, right? My border collie pee out of the car, pees instantly. It's fantastic, right? I don't have to worry about potty timing for that dog, right? But for the other one, I have to worry about potty timing. There has to be an adequate amount of time that I'm not rushing that situation because I know that if I put pressure on the 12-pound Sheltie, she's going to get really stubborn and then she's not. And then her little brain's going to be haywire while she's running and we get out and she pees like for 90 seconds. And I'm like, are you okay? Right? So I want to avoid that best as possible. So I have to account for potty timing in my pre-run, right? My build up to my competition time. When we get to bigger events, for those of you that are either going to AKC Nationals, who go to the Invitational, or are looking at a tryouts event, the first thing you should do on the day that you get to the trial is take a stopwatch and time how long it takes you to get from your crate stall or your crating spot to the ring. How long does it take you to walk from the ring to the bathroom? How long does it take you to walk to the good potty spot, right? How long does it take you to walk to the car? How long does it take you to get lunch, right? Maybe pack lunch? Am I driving to lunch? Because if I'm driving to lunch, I want to know how long that's going to take me casually. I don't want anything to be rushed at the last second. We want everything to be, oh, okay, I have an allotted amount of time that I can easily fit this need or demand into, right? Whether that's warming up my dog, pottying myself, pottying the dog, getting food, etc. Right? Know how long things takes. It makes life a lot easier when we get down to competition day. And a lot of that is because we're reducing decision fatigue, which a lot of worrying or contemplating possible outcomes are our mental stressors. A lot of that does come from not having clear expectations of how long things are going to take, how severe things are, not having clear expectations of our performance. What do we actually consider as success, right? Now I'm doubting my abilities. I'm doubting whether this is going to go well. I'm overthinking certain things, right? If we're having things like that, we'll stop and say, can I measure this, right? Is there some way that I can make this more controllable, right? If that's something like worrying about the opinions of people, I was so proud of them. One of my clients the other day had a situation. Someone said something vaguely about her dog on a Facebook group. She's going into a major event next week. She's going to nationals. She muted the Facebook group for 30 days. So proud. Because that is how you get rid of worrying about opinions from other people. I will not look at the opinions of other people, right? Therefore, I don't have to care. Because if it's happening online and I find out 6 months later, I'm not, oh well, oops, right? I hope that I proved them wrong in the past 6 months or whatever, right? But taking control, if I'm having thoughts of worry about this certain thing or having thoughts of self-doubt in this certain way, saying, okay, well, what can I do to mitigate that stress, right? Can I get rid of it? Can I manage it or measure it some way, right? Or can I shift my focus to something else that's going to help me take care of this as a byproduct of focusing on this other thing, right? Like if I'm having self-doubts about my handling plan, focusing on what are my relevant cues? What are like the 3 things I really need to do to support my dog throughout this run, right? Well, by focusing on those things, I'm probably making it more likely that I'm going to do those really important things that's going to help my dog perform and avoid the things that I was, doubting that we could handle, right? So either shifting our focus, mitigating a stressor by managing it, measuring it, or eliminating the stressor altogether if we can, right? When it comes to physical nerves, those bodily sensations, one of the things we want to know is that our nervous system has shifted into a sympathetic response, where we're in fight, flight. One of the things we need to do is be able to control our physiology in some way and have awareness, like I said, of how this is starting to escalate, because it's very likely that you get one of these symptoms first, right? Your heart rate starts to increase, then your legs start trembling, right? And then you have to really go to the bathroom. And that's my peak stress point, right? Well, if I had taken a moment to regain a little bit of control over my physiology, whether that's with a thought or a physical task, I could have prevented those other symptoms from onsetting at all, or maybe onsetting slightly less severe, right? Because we're going to talk about deliberate breathing. Yes, absolutely, right? And deep breathing is a great way to control our physiology. One of the interesting things about deep breathing, it doesn't really matter what type of breath work you prefer. There's all sorts of different patterns. There's box breathing, there's bellows breathing. You can do a specific meditation, like Buddhists count up to 21 and then back down. You can do, I think it's like 5, 7, 8, something like that, for how long you breathe in, how long you hold it, how long you breathe out. It doesn't really matter what pattern you use. The point is that we're actually engaging the diaphragm, right? And filling our lungs with as much gas as possible. And that shifts our CO2 and O2 balances, which helps calm us down. And we're refocusing back on the present moment, because breathing only exists right now. I can't focus on what my breathing is going to be like a week from now, right? I can certainly worry about what my performance is going to be like a week from now, but it's really hard for us to project physical sensations into the future, which we're going to talk a little bit about too, when we talk about how to mitigate.
Think about that hurting trauma.
Right. So when we think about how nerves are working, nerves are a sign that our body and mind are preparing to take on whatever task it is. Nerves are a good thing, right? They facilitate performance. I work down on Fort Carson as a cognitive performance specialist, and we do a lot of reaction time type testing. One of the things that we always see is that the people who come in and before they start working out do our reaction time tests, their reactions are slower than they are when they're in the middle of their workout or post-workout, right? Middle of the workout, their reactions might falter. We might have more mistakes, but their reactions are actually faster than they were when they were in a very low arousal state, because being in a really low arousal does not help us with high-speed performance. And one of the things we want to think about is how we're managing our arousal for the events that we're doing. So this is true for us and our dogs. They have a very similar physiological response to stressors. And we want to keep in mind that not all of this shifting is due to distress. It's not always a bad stressor, right? We're talking a lot about a lot of bad stressors, because those are the ones that usually cause us performance errors. But there's also really good stressors, right? That's our eustress. For example, an easy one is walking into a building and having it be full of really upbeat music, right? Your arousal level is going to go up a little bit. You're going to be like, oh, this is really fun. You're going to start moving to it, right? Your brain's getting excited because it recognizes the song. It really likes the song. You have good memories associated to it. So we have a shift in arousal up, but due to a really positive thing, right? Same thing with our dogs. If I present a toy to my border collie, right, her arousal level goes up significantly due to a good thing, right? If I show her the bottle of hydrogen peroxide, she used to swallow socks as a puppy, her arousal level is going to go up, but in a bad way, because she's going to look at that and go, oh no, I'm running away as fast as possible. I'm hitting full flight mode to get away from that bottle. So what we want to think about is, where is our optimal performance zone on this scale? What do I want to feel like before a run in agility? What do I want to feel like before I step in the obedience ring? What do I want to feel like before a group event and confirmation? that's probably going to be different for each event in each person. Even in agility, it can vary from run to run. What do I want to feel before steeplechase finals versus what do I want to feel like before premier standard? One of the things we want to think about is how arousal and performance are correlated. And what we see is that simple tasks can allow you to operate a much higher arousal level. If I'm doing a 400-meter sprint, or we're watching our dogs do fly ball, we can get our arousal level really, really high. We can be at, think about fly ball dogs, they're at a full 10, they're losing their marbles. Maybe they're at a 9, right? Because they can at least still run straight, right? But that's all we're asking of them, right? The movement pattern is really simple as long as you have the box trained well, right? So it has to be proficient. We can't just throw any dog out there, but they can have a really high arousal level because the movement patterns are relatively simple, right? If I had fly ball level energy going into a premier standard run, I would be scared. Right? I would be scared. Be like, this is not going to go well because the dog's not going to have the capability of listening, right? And responding and making some of these stride adjustments that I need to make in agility. So when we think about a simple task, we can think about higher level of arousal. When I think about a really complex task, we think about, like, let's say ice skaters, right? They probably have a much more moderate level of excitement, probably like a 6 or a 7, because the nature of their task, highly difficult. And the consequence is also very high, either cracking your head open on ice or slicing someone open, right? We don't want to be at a 9 or a 10 where those movement patterns might be compromised, right? Because they're much more complex for us to go through. And the duration of the event, right? The fact that I have to stay concentrated for that long. Being at a high arousal level burns our energy up really quickly, right? So I don't want to stay at a 9 or a 10 for a 5-minute routine. Be exhausted, right? So we want to think about where we're supposed to be for the difficulty of our task, right? Is this a complex task or is this a relatively simple task, right? That's going to dictate where I should be. And what else is going to come into play is, how do you like feeling when you perform? And that's one of the things that we really need to figure out for ourselves. That's different for every person. And depending on what dog you're handling, it might change, right? And very often, one of the things I notice in agility training in particular is people who are having a hard time doing agility typically have a mismatch of where the dog's energy level is and where the handler wants to be. Because our dogs can pull our energy level one direction or the other, right? If I'm someone who wants to be hyped up and I have a dog that's like half sleeping at agility class, they're just not really bought into it yet, we haven't found that spark for the game, that person's likely really having a hard time with that relationship with that dog, right? And with their relationship with their performance, because where they want to be operating, right, they're constantly having to like drag up this anchor, right? Same thing for a dog that's really high and a handler who wants to be calm, right? So we get frustration. A lot of people get to a point where they just can't handle it because the dog is buzzing and they want to be at like a 4 or 5, right? And that dog is constantly pulling them up into a higher arousal level, right? It's really uncomfortable. And then we react, right? Which is part of what we're going to try to get away from today. We don't want to be reactive in any of these states. We want to say, oh, I'm really frustrated. My arousal level is not where I need it to be. What can I do? Because there's always something to get myself back to where my optimal level is. And we want to think about that in terms of physical sensations and emotions. So is that maybe we like the butterfly feeling? Some of us do, right? Especially if you rationalize to yourself already and shift your perspective on nerves and said, ooh, the butterfly feeling, I'm really excited. This is going to be fun, right? This run matters, right? I don't usually feel this way at local events because we're just collecting cues and, we just kind of go through the motions, but now it's nationals. It's exciting, right? If we see that as a good thing, right, maybe that's something we want to pay attention to. We want to think about whether we like to be relaxed. Do I want to go into the ring feeling happy, grateful, joyful? Am I laughing with my dog?
Yes.
Or I like going into the ring serious, right? Is that serious hyped up, or is that serious really calm? Like we're quiet, we're contemplative, right? We're in our Zen state, we're deep breathing. Or are we somebody who's sitting on the start line bouncing, tugging with their dog, going, we've got this, we're going in. Both of those people might have fantastic performances, but one way of setting themselves up for the run was right for one person and would have been wrong for the other person. Right? If I take that person who loves tugging with their dog, they want to be hyped up, they want to go into the ring with that feeling of like, we're badass, we're going to show them, right? And I take that person and I say, okay, you can only do deep breathing. You have to stay as calm as possible, no tugging with your dog. They're going to have a really bad run, right? And they're going to be in a really bad headspace and they're not in the right arousal level for what they need. So we want to think about that. And we want to think about this in terms of our dogs as well. And how do these things interact? Because very often the problem we have is what I need to do to feel good in the ring is in conflict with what I need to do for my dog for them to be in the right headspace going into the ring. We want to think about how both of our optimal zones interact. So, yep. Yeah, having multiple dogs definitely comes into play. And it's very likely that each dog has a different optimal zone, very likely. And you might even have a different optimal zone with each dog. Very often we find that people who have a dog that's really high, they like to be calm because it can help balance out our energy. Very common experience that we have in dog sports for almost any sport. Well, if I have a experienced dog who's at a 7, this is an interesting part of arousal. So complexity of the task is subjective. My novice dog going into an international run, right? Or my novice dog going to their first national season, that's a really complex task. My 8 or 9-year-old really experienced dog going into the same event, that's a less complex task. So I might find that my older dog can tolerate us being at a higher arousal level together, right? And I can be at a higher arousal level with that older dog because of our experience, right? The amount of training that we have, the amount of preparation, the amount of competition experience has made it so that this next performance is less complicated than it would have been 6 or 7 years ago with that dog, right? So we might see that difference if you are taking dogs with different training competencies, even because sometimes we have our older dog knows some skills and our younger dog has a totally different set of skills because we have learned and we changed everything. We moved to a new place. We're training with someone new now, right? I used to do everything right on top of my dog and my next dog has amazing distance, right? Well, chances are the older dog probably fits like a nice glove, right? And the new dog feels a little bit uncertain because we're not as proficient. Our competency isn't as high with that dog, so this feels more complicated, right? How do I run this course from 15 feet away? Or how do I run this course from 20 feet away? Because my border collie needs me to get out of the way, right? And my Lhasa, who's my first dog, I can run right on top of him the entire way, right? I ran the outside of the tunnels half the time, right? Totally different game. So we want to think about that too, right? How does our experience with this dog or how does our experience overall come into play when we're thinking about the difficulty of the task and the complexity here? Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and having something else to worry about, like my dog's perception, the lighting. There's lots of us who pay attention to lighting. I noticed in here we have in the agility arena, one of the lights in the back corner was out. And even when I was setting course, I was like, ooh, this looks really shadowy when you take this jump this direction. So I changed the color of the jump so it was more contrasting to the back wall. And if you've ever had a dog with ETS or if you ever had a dog who will impale themselves, right? We're always analyzing the course for safety or angles of approach. It's something we're thinking about actively while we're running, because if you're like me, which I'm sure many of you are if you're here at this point, you care about your dog's well-being over the cue. And if they're going to crash the triple, you're not going to run them, right? So if there's anything we can do to predict that, and that's something that's coming into play in terms of how we have to manage our dog's arousal level or how that might be shifting our arousal level, right? That level of uncertainty of is my dog going to get injured might be pulling me into a higher arousal level, right? Which maybe is freaking my dog out. Maybe my dog shuts down when I get higher, right? We see that in that relationship as well. Something that we want to be keeping in mind. Yeah. She was giving herself a better perspective. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Definitely changes the game though to have something like that you're constantly adapting to. Yeah, very similar to the people who go into the ring and they don't know what dog they're going to have, right? That can make managing arousal really hard. So what we want to think about is what can we do for us being thoughts and actions we can take, and for our dogs being tricks or things that I can do for them to help set them up for the right arousal. So how we manage our arousal level impacts the dog, and how we manage their arousal level impacts us. And this can be sometimes as simple as thoughts and actions that help us reach this state. If I like going into my run really happy, I might choose gratitude statements as a pre-run activity of reminding myself I have the best dog in the world. They try so hard for me. I'm so grateful to be here with them. I'm so grateful that they're healthy, right? And I'm going to go into that run having put myself in an emotional state that really benefits my performance, right? On the flip side, if I'm someone who goes into a run and I want to feel like a badass, right? I want to lay this down, and I really like the competition side. I really like running aggressively, and I want to put myself in the headspace of like, I'm going to push every foot of this and lay down the fastest run that I can, and hold nothing back. I want to go all out. Well, chances are gratitude statements probably aren't going to put you in that headspace, right? But what might is that like one song that makes you feel like a badass. So play that for yourself before you take your dog out, so we can help hold on to those lyrics, or have a quote that you really love and remind yourself of that quote before you step to the line, right? We'll talk a little bit more about timing of some of these tasks, but those are examples of how I can shift my emotions into a certain state, right? By using thoughts, or by focusing on certain types of language, right? How I talk to myself really matters in terms of setting ourselves up for some of these things. We can also take actions, right? Which is like deliberate breathing, where there's something I'm physically doing that's helping shift my physiology to where I need it to be, right? One of the things that's interesting about breathing is that we can use it in both directions. We can use breathing to calm ourselves down. We can also use breathing to hype ourselves up, which for most events doesn't really seem like it'd be all that advantageous. But if, let's say, we're at a major tournament where we're there from 6 a.m. in the morning, and our last run, congratulations, you made finals. Let's go to Westminster. Finals is happening at 11 p.m. You've been here since 5 a.m. You are going into that run. It is past your bedtime. Your brain is shut down. The dog is like, we've been here for forever, right? In this artificial, I guess Westminster's outside now. It used to be in an indoor pier, and it was freezing outside, and there's just artificial light. You're in New York City. You don't really want to walk outside. There's nowhere to go, right? If we're in a situation like that, I might want something to hype myself up, even if I'm usually a person who's calm, because I need to keep in mind my fatigue level over the course of the day also impacts my arousal state. If you're someone who's really sleepy in the morning and you're on the line at 7:30, you might be someone who wants to do something that's more arousal inducing before that run. And when we get to the afternoon run, where you're fully awake, that's like your peak natural arousal level during the day. You get the best work done when you're at work during that time zone, and you're really awake. You just had another coffee. That might be a situation where now we're choosing a calming activity. So we want to think about, what do we have at our disposal to shift ourselves in any direction, right? We don't want to make assumptions that I'm always going to feel a certain way, or that the memories that are most vivid for you, if you look back at your competition experience, that the ones that stand out, that's not all the time, right? Very often those memories stand out because they were the most negative, or they stand out because they're like the most painful memories, or the ones that you felt the most out of control, right? But there's lots of variation in between, even throughout our trial day. So having things at the ready to shift in either direction is really important. When we think about the dogs, it's the same thing. Is there anything that I can ask them to do, such as a eye contact game before we go in the ring, or tugging with them or asking for basic tricks like lie down, sit, spin, etc. Is there anything I can do that's going to shift their arousal level in the right direction in terms of behaviors I can ask them for? And then we want to ask, is there anything I can do to manage their environment to help their arousal level? So for example, I have 2 dogs on the opposite end of the spectrum. My border collie, very emotionally sensitive. She shuts down a little bit. When we were training things early on, she used to just quit. It was very amusing looking back. In the moment, not so much. But anything that got too hard, she was like, I'm out, I don't want to be wrong. She would just go lay down or offer me a default behavior that she thought that she could get rewarded for instead of doing the weave pulse, right? What I did for her was outside of the ring, I made her bark as much as I can make her. I offered treats for her to bark at the other dogs. As she started to bark at the other dogs, I encouraged it. Once her arousal level got higher, she was interested in tugging. And then it became bark at the other dog's tug, bark at the other dog's tug. So I shifted her arousal level at competitions significantly. I went from a dog who would walk under the jumps, if I didn't say the word jump, to a dog that was trying to take off horses because she was so excited to go out onto the agility course and play, right? But I had to do that for her. I had to shift her in that direction, right? I have the exact opposite now because life, it's funny how it works that way. I have the exact opposite problem with my Sheltie. Her arousal level is far too high. She's a crackhead for agility. I have spent my entire time with her doing things to bring her back down. So while my border collie, I bring right up to the fence and I'm encouraging barking, tugging. I keep my arousal level really high, right? I'm bouncing around, moving with her, asking for her favorite tricks, right? We're running a lot. I do the exact opposite for my Sheltie. We stay fairly far away from the ring. I do all calming activities. We all do all focus games. I ask her for highly complex tasks to see whether she's focused enough the way I think her to. I ask her to put her nose through my fingers. And if she misses, I know that she's distracted. If she can do it consistently, I'm like, oh, good. I have you where I want you, right? So that's a good check-in behavior. And a lot of our behaviors are nice check-ins because we know what we should see when I offer my dog to tuck, right? On the flip side, I ask my border collie for very simple behaviors as a confidence boost, right? So every interaction we have with them is shifting them one direction or the other. We're either maintaining our arousal level where it is, we're taking it higher, we're taking it lower. And particularly the few minutes before our run, we really want to know what makes our dog tick and when should I be using certain things to help set them up for success, to put them in the best headspace and best physiological state of arousal for them to be focused, engaged, and happy, right? We're not in a state of distress. We've kept them in eustress. A lot of people, when they have a dog that's over aroused, they go to physical corrections. Well, now we have a dog that's really over aroused and you've just added a lot of distress, right? In a competition setting, that is really detrimental. We want to be really careful about how we're managing the dog's behaviors. Even if in the moment, losing it a little bit and screaming stop works. We want to think about how we shifted the dog's arousal level, right? Because adding distress is not necessarily creating more focus and engagement. Adding distress is probably creating more avoidance and disconnection. We've just suppressed the behavior for now. It's not gone. We didn't actually shift the arousal level all that much. We suppressed it. Versus actually having behaviors that we've trained or that I've planned specifically to help the dog shift in a direction and actually be able to stay there, right? We want to think about the same thing for ourselves. A lot of people go to judgment when they start to feel their nerves get out of control and they start saying things like, oh, that this is wrong, or I shouldn't do that, or no, don't think that kind of thing. All we're doing is suppressing. You haven't actually given yourself anything to change your state. We've just said, don't be that way, or don't think that, or don't feel that, right? Suppression doesn't help us get out of that place. It just puts it on pause for now, right? And then usually it comes back twice as strong, right? We see the same things with the dogs. If I can suppress their behavior going into the ring, it's the second they come off leash, they're gone, right? Right off the start line, right? And it's a really easy thing for us to do because the instant gratification right? If I suppress my emotions or I suppress a physiological feeling, right? An easy one that people do all the time, I'm shaking, I pinch myself, right? I've refocused momentarily to the pinching. Pinching is not a positive, right? I haven't actually done anything to lower my state of arousal. All I've done is momentarily distracted my brain and I'm focused on the other thing. As soon as that stops, I'm going to go right back to shaking again, right? But if instead I do something that does change my physiological state, like deep breathing or taking a walk outside and getting out of the sensory experience of being in the competition site, right? Well, now I have actually changed my arousal level. Now I have a chance of maintaining it where it's at, right? So we want to be careful when we're doing some of these adjustments to not just say, that's wrong, I shouldn't do that, or my dog's doing something wrong, they shouldn't do that, and actually say, okay, this is where we're at. How do I move? How can I be flexible in this state, right? Any examples off the top of your head of things that you already do to put your arousal level in the right place or to help your dog's arousal level be in the right place? Deep breathing? Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good timing for it too. Good timing for it too. Knowing when you do deep breathing is important. Yeah. Any other examples? Yeah.
Really shifting my care and my focus on how they're doing. And that takes it away from all the judgment and internal stuff that I've got going on and realizing that it's my responsibility to regulate them. And I learned this years and years ago when I had a lot of performance anxiety around public speaking and I was teaching. So I would be completely anxious. And the way that I managed it the best, I had to try a lot of different things, was to basically, at the moment that I was going to go out and start teaching, to just basically sort of connect and almost pray to be there for the people who are going to receive the information. Could this be of the most benefit for them? And that's what would take my anxiety level from myself enough that I could be present for others. And I have some specific questions actually, but this is maybe not the moment.
Yeah, well, I would love to reiterate that, just because I'm not sure how good the volume is, and that was a fantastic example. Because you drew on a past experience, right? And mental skills are transferable from some of those other experiences, which is what we talked about very early on. So the example shared was shifting focus from me and my nerves about worrying about what people think or worrying about how this is going to go, and saying the only thing that matters right now is that I prioritize my dog's arousal state, I prioritize their well-being, I make sure that they're as prepared for what we're about to do as possible. And focusing on the dog, first of all, I love, because I think it brings us really back to that initial internal motivation that got most of us into dog sports, because your dog's wicked cool, right? They're really cool. Trust me, I spend a lot of time with pet dogs. Your dogs are really cool. One of the things that we want to think about is coming back to that why. Why am I here, right? What are my priorities and my values actually, right? Just like we talked about at the very beginning in terms of our perceptions, right? And when we have a lot of what will people think of us, or I'm not a good handler, if we actually stop to redefine those things, what does it mean to actually be a good handler? Right? Because someone can be a phenomenal handler, and if they treat their dog like crap, nobody likes them for good reason, because most of us prioritize the dog's well-being first. They're not machines to do this for us. We're the one who signed the entry fees, right? So I find that coming back to the dog is a fantastic example, right? And the past experience that you shared of public speaking and saying, okay, I'm really nervous for all these external reasons that we don't have control over, right? Why am I here? Well, I'm here to share information that's going to be of value to the people who came to listen. That's a fantastic example. And I really like that you were able to transfer that skill of, I'm here for someone else. I'm going to prioritize their needs as a way to refocus yourself and start to choose to focus on things that are within your control and are beneficial to you and your team. Right? That's fantastic. And you, so we have a few questions, and I'll get to your questions. Yes, I'm Yep, dog massage is the first one. There's more. Okay, I love dog massage. So dog massage is often one of those physical things that we can do to change our physiology and our dog's physiology, right? Because when we pet our dogs, we get all the happy hormones, at least in our brains, and then theirs too. So if your dog is content and satisfied with you engaging in massage, that's fantastic. We do want to be careful not to do any deep tissue prior to performance. So we don't want to break up any toxins that are in the muscle and have those floating around while we're doing a performance. But gentle massage is fantastic and helps us focus on the present moment. A lot of physical sensations only exist in the present moment. So what we want to think about in terms of grounding ourselves and coming back to a state of I'm here, I'm in control, I'm aware of what's going on in my body and my head. Physical sensations are fantastic for that, because even something as simple as this only exists right now. I can only feel this if I'm actively doing it, right? Same thing with touching our dog's fur. So if I'm focused on that feeling, by definition, I'm in the present moment, right? We can even do that with something as simple as feeling your feet in your shoes, right? And like grounding your heels into the ground and reminding yourself of what your shoes feel like on, what the footing feels like. If we're on dirt versus turf versus concrete, that's all going to feel different. We can only experience that right now. So physical sensations are fantastic. And then Helen shared that she does different games with her dog to help with impulse control and keep the dog calm. And good. And Lena's thinking about the course while rousing the dog. And we're going to talk a little bit more about reviewing our course and types of thoughts that we should be having prior to our runs when it comes to thinking about our handling in particular. Put that back in the corner. Okay, cool. Okay. Yes.
Oh,
not worry about keep getting too long
Mm.
fire, but just trying to find how to mix that and not a whole lot.
Yeah. So
that's the opposite for
I
me.
know,
right?
one-
That's funny.
I'm like, oh,
yeah, yeah.
I can just breathe for a
Good.
minute before I-
Yes, for me, it depends on the dog. Right. So the example for those of you on Zoom was praying for the moment that you step to the line and they say, wait a second, we have a timer malfunction or the judge needs a drink, and you get that extra second to kind of go, oh, thank God, take a deep breath, let all the tension go, and now you feel ready for your run. And yeah. And it's a very common occurrence that people feel rushed on the start line. And we've all had moments where like a judge gets a little bit pissy about how fast things are moving. And I get it. They're standing there all day long. But one of the things you want to think about is how long does it actually take to do your start line routine the way that you want to do it that feels good? Because chances are it's not 5 minutes, right? Chances are it's not even 2 minutes. Maybe it's about 90 seconds, right? So taking a stopwatch and saying from entering the ring gate to getting set up, taking that deep breath, telling my dog stay and walking away, how long does it actually take? Because if it's 45 seconds isn't an inconvenience to anyone that you're going to get yelled at for, right? So now we have the freedom to say, I can give myself that time and it's not ruining anyone else's day and it's setting us up for success, right? So having that relative, because when we're in the ring, we're a little bit self-centered too, right? The whole world is like us right here, right now, which is where it should be, honestly. But if we start thinking about other people and how, because to us, this moment feels so dragged out and so important, right? But to other people, you're just like one more run, right? And unless you're that person who walks back to the start line like 30 times, chances are no one's irritated with you, right? And if they are irritated with you, that's okay, right? Life goes on. Hope that you're not in the running order by them in the future, right? Like, better luck next time, buddy. Yeah, hope you're not behind me. Now you know that I'm going to take my extra 5 seconds to take a deep breath before I walk away. So the thing I would say to do is give yourself that freedom. Like, figure out how long it takes and just say that is my start line routine, right? Maybe go back and watch some of those runs in time. How long did it take for you to feel I have this, right? And then give yourself that time, right? And if we can make that more efficient by having a more tailored start line routine, sure, that's fantastic. It'll make you feel better. Because very often when we're going into the ring, feeling discombobulated with our dog when you step into the ring is a really unfortunate feeling. Like the dog steps in front of you, you trip a little bit, they squirt out from under you, they're trying to back out of the collar, and you have to get them all calmed down, right? That type of disconnection prior to a performance, regardless of what sport you do, is really disorienting for us and shifts our focus way off of our performance to, oh no, this problem that just happened, or oh god, that was so embarrassing, I tripped over my dog, or like my coat caught on the ring gate and we like pulled the ring gate down and recovering from that. We had the ring gate fall down here the other day. Someone closed the gate and the whole thing down. They were a little forceful with their gate close. It happens, right? But how do we recover from some of those things, right? And very often having a really tailored start line routine where what I'm asking for my dog, how I set them up for that first move, the things that I'm doing, right? If that's taking a deep breath or telling yourself something one more time, or just hyper focusing on the dog's performance, whatever it is, knowing what that's supposed to feel like, and knowing if I get thrown off by either getting rushed into the ring, because we still need to be flexible. There's still going to be moments, even if I say, okay, my pre-run routine takes 45 seconds from the gate to the start line. There might be that day where you pull up to the ring and they're like, it's you, get in, right? Happens, right? So now we're in this rush state. How do I shift back to where I want to be, right? And same thing with something going wrong, right? If something does go wrong, or if our dog's being particularly fussy or acting weird, right? How do I still maintain as much control as possible, right? So keep that in mind as you tailor down your start line routine or tailor down how much time you're going to give yourself. Leave it variable. It can't be a ritual of this has to happen other time or like all the time or else. Lots of people do that. It's like the lucky shoes thing. If you don't have your lucky shoes, then you're not going to do well, right? We don't want to get attached to stuff in that way, whether that's routines or specific items that we carry with us into the ring. But it can be a source of comfort and familiarity of, I know that I give myself this much time. I know that this is what my routine looks like, and it always sets us up for success, right? That's a really nice feeling to have, as long as we're still flexible about it. That we might not always get that, but that shouldn't be a determining factor in what happens, 5-10 seconds from now, right? Other questions on arousal management type stuff?
So there's a couple layers, but they all come together.
Yep.
So for me, by far, the biggest stress is remembering. And it's like, it's so far beyond most people's stress level of that, because I actually have a disability about it, directional and dyslexic and all of that. So it takes a long time, gazillion repetitions in my head and drawing it out and mapping it out to get that course, when someone in place. So in a 2-ring trial, for example, when it's like, so it's not as bad in a 1-ring, but in a 2-ring, it's like, am I going to go in the jumpers ring first, or am I going to go in the center ring? Which one? Well, oh my God, which course do I have to like cement in before I walk in? So there's that super high level of arousal. And then both of my dogs, which are extremes, Craphead and the one who does it for treats only.
Yeah.
but they're both equally motivated, but in completely different ways.
Yeah.
But both of them can fall apart really easily in start line stuff, depending on what's going on. But I know that for both of them, the most important thing for them is my state, because they're both super emotionally
In tune with you.
and in
Yeah.
tune. So if I'm calm, and my desire, my intention is to be in the joyful state when I'm running. So if I'm in that state, I know that works best for them. So managing the start line stuff with each dog and all the vagaries that can happen at the start line, as we all know, both outside the ring and once you get in. But at the same time, for me, trying to go like, my God, do I still remember the course? Because I'm spending so much time now trying to settle my dog, and the gate person is yelling like, "You're next." It's like, I know I'm next. I'm over here for a reason, so trying to manage all the stress of being told, to do it in a particular way when I know that's not the way it works for me. But the main thing is the background of how do I manage all those and remember the course? Because if I remember the course and I know I'm going to remember the course, now I can be in a state of settling my dogs and now it's going to go well. But my dogs can tell when I'm trying to settle them, but I'm actually really thinking about the course. Right?
Yeah,
They know.
They
that
do
I'm
know.
Not present. And so how to manage them, because the nerves around that are huge.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons. I mean, including having been shamed in the past many times
yeah,
for losing the course, not in competition, nobody cares, but in classes.
yeah,
And by people in other situations, like driving, turning the wrong way, or walking out of my hotel room and turning the wrong way to the elevator, even though I've been in that hotel room for 4 days. You know,
Yeah.
like it's a really significant thing. I've made a huge amount of progress, but that is what determines my ability to regulate state.
absolutely.
So it's like, I don't know, that's my challenge. So there's not really a specific question. It's kind of like, how do I hold that tension of maintaining, because it can fall apart like pickup sticks. I mean, really, it can.
Yeah.
Like if I turn away or I look at a different course because there's the course coming up, it's like I've lost that. Now I
Yeah.
have to get it all over.
It completely deconstructed itself on
So,
you.
yeah, so now how do I hold all that and manage all these other things and my state? And that is the key to state.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
my
And so I think
dilemma.
the core question there is, how do I manage my arousal state when I have competing priorities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Competing priorities like memorizing the course, competing priorities like having to be in two places at the same time, competing priorities like you promised to film someone who's like 3 dogs after you or 2 dogs before you, right? Or competing priorities like knowing someone's watching, right? There's other things that we can have impacting us in addition to I'm trying to put myself in the right headspace. I'm trying to get my dog in the right headspace, right? So I think the very first thing I would say is anything that we can put a boundary around, put a boundary around, because no one else will for you. No one else is going to say, you know what, there's a lot going on here. Why don't we just move you to the top of the 12-inch class, right? You go focus on your jumpers run. And when you're done with that, you can come walk again with the 12-inch group and you're going to do your run then. No one's going to do that for you. But very often, if you have a boundary with yourself of, if I have a conflict within 20 dogs, or if I have a conflict within 15 dogs, it's my money, it's my time, it's my investment. It does not help me or my dog to go from ring to ring. If at all possible, I see this starting to collide, the timing is turning out that way, the very first thing I'm going to do is say, let me talk to the gate. Let me see what the flexibility is, which ring takes priority, right? Because there's always one, and chances are there's going to be someone who's going to be willing to work with you on that, and give yourself, very similar to the start line routine, right? Give yourself the time that you need and the time that you want to set yourself up for success, right? Create some boundaries around that, right? So the parameters being, how much time do I need to remember the course and feel confident with that, right? I would have a specific number of things that we do. So if you mentioned drawing the course, and I'm sure reviewing it in your head, right? So maybe I say, I'm going to draw my dog's path lunge on the actual map. I'm going to take a blank piece of paper, redraw the course map, and then I'll do 3 visualizations, right? And that's my memorization time. However long that takes me on average, that's the time that I want to allow for that. And then I have my 10-minute warm-up routine with my dog, and then 5 minutes to go in the ring, right? If that's 25 minutes, if I have a conflict within 30 dogs, I'm going to ask for more time, right? And that's what conflict is for, right? Life goes on, right? It's not going to happen all the time. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And just, communicating tends to be the biggest barrier, right? So stick the C by your name, talk to well, you're still calm and have your wits together and you haven't run back and forth 10 times, talk to the gate then before they start yelling at you, right? And say, hey, I have a run over there, right? I really want to make sure I prioritize my dog. I don't want my dog doing back-to-back runs because their energy level can't tolerate that, right? After that first run, they're gassed for a little while. They need a short break before I can bring them back, right? That would be another great reason to just say, I'm going to take the time that I need. If at all possible, I'm going to give myself the time that I need, right? So then the question becomes, when I don't get that luxury, right? What can I do then to help manage these competing priorities if I can't place a boundary around it? And sometimes those boundaries are people boundaries. Please don't talk to me before my run, right? Please don't ask me to watch your video. Please don't ask me to video you. Well, unfortunately, I can't ask everyone at the trial not to do that. I need to ask myself, please don't say yes to that, right? Or please tell them how you actually feel and don't just agree to it because you want to make them happy in the moment. And then 2 minutes later, you go, shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have said yes to that because now I'm taking away from my time with my dog to go focus on someone else's time with their dog, which is great. If we have the time available, I want to be there to support my friends, my students too, right? But think about what boundaries do we want, right? All goes into how do I set myself up for success. If you know that there's people who wig you out at the trial, while you're calm, tell them, hey, sometimes when you talk to me before my run, it's really distracting. I really want to give my full focus to my dog. I was blame someone else. I was talking to my coach about it, and they told me that I need to focus on my dog 10 minutes prior to my run, and I'm not allowed to talk to anybody. My coach said so. So I want to let you know, if you come up to me and talk to me, it's not my fault, my coach's fault, right? Throw someone else on. It doesn't even have to be your fault. Throw someone else under the bus. It doesn't have to be an awkward social situation. It just has to be you giving yourself the chance to have the time, to have the clarity, to have the space to do the other things that set you up for success, right? I know agility instructors and coaches in all dog sports have that problem of when they get ready with their own dog and someone comes up with a question of, what do you think about the novice course? And you're like, that's in 4 hours, right? I have my dog out right now, is not the time, right? But sometimes that can be really awkward. And what we do is we panic in the moment and then we react at that person. And it's our novice student, we say something really mean, right? And now that person maybe feels bad or feels like they can't approach you later on, right? We might have just shifted that whole dynamic because in the moment I wasn't thinking about it, I wasn't being intentional. I just panicked because I can't do this right now, right? And I don't have my emotional shit together enough to tell you that in an eloquent way. But if we warn people prior to, and I say, hey, novice students, I know you're coming to your first trial this weekend. So excited for you to be here. If I have my dog out, that means that we're getting ready for a run, right? If you have a question, I really appreciate if you hold off on it. I'm more than happy to talk to you. Find me when I don't have a dog in my hands. If I don't have a dog in my hands, I'm all ears, right? And just give people some structure to operate around you. They're happy to do it, right? Nobody would be upset if they said, oh, cool, now I know exactly when my agility coach has time for me, right? Now I can plan into my day when I can talk to her about problems and not spend the whole day following her around, holding the course map going, I wonder if now is a good time, right before you run up. I've had people do that to me where they shadow me for a minute and I'm like, do you want to talk about it? And they're like, are you not busy? And I'm like, no, I just come and ask, right? But if I give you that boundary, then it's a little bit more free, right? And we're just reducing the stress level throughout the day and reducing some of those decisions that cause us fatigue, right? Of, do I have time for this? Should I say no? If I say no, will they think badly of me? Well, if I've already said yes, is it too late to tell them I actually can't do that because the timing's now changing, right? And now I spend the whole day burning, our brain burns glucose. Like we're using real energy when we're spinning the wheels through all those what if scenarios. By just saying, these are my boundaries, this is what I'm valuing, this is what I'm prioritizing. All of those decisions go away because they're already answered. I'm prioritizing my dog. The answer is no to everything. It's not for them, it's a no for the next 15, 30 minutes. And that's just how it is, right? So that would be a lot of what I'd be doing in terms of reducing all the other stressors. And then we want to think about having a routine in place as either a memory boost, a confidence boost, a calming effect, whatever we need prior to our run, right? And that's a lot of what we're doing is we're kind of doing a needs assessment today, right? And reflecting on what works for me, what isn't working, what could I be doing, what works in other places of my life that I could be pulling into agility, right? Any other thoughts or questions on optimizing our arousal level for us and for our dogs? No? Any questions on the chat? No? Cool. Okay. So, I'm not clicked in. Yes.
It may be beyond what I talked about.
Okay.
part of arousing, or managing arousal level is also just chaos that happens before the run. And, so like, for example, a couple weeks ago at a trial, I was approaching the gate, it was my turn,
Mhm.
and there were like 3 people with puppies on leashes, and the puppies are playing with each other right almost in front of the gate.
Mhm.
Another one was one of my other dog was like the one who's completely treat crazy. And somebody is like way close to the gate treating their dog, treat. And my dog's like, and I feel really shy about saying something, but I want to say something.
Mhm.
Could you guys leave those puppies away from the gate? Could you please treat your
The
dog?
gate steward should say something.
Well, yes, should,
Yeah.
but doesn't always.
Right.
Yeah.
But then that adds another level of social stress.
And
into the
distraction.
entry,
And
right?
distraction.
Right, because like, do I say something? Do I not say something? If I do say something, I'm probably not gonna be very nice about it, and I'm pretty pissed off that I know my dog has been waiting all day for this run, and now you've got these puppies right there. Are you kidding me? Because my dog's a puppy,
Yeah.
like, so so that adds another level of arousal is like when I feel, my perception might not be true, that people are unaware of their surroundings. And these are people who are competitors and should
Yeah.
know what the surroundings mean, right? Like not being respectful of other people's faith.
Yeah.
And options. But anyway, so
Yeah.
that adds like another level
Absolutely.
of social stress, because if I don't say something, I'm affecting my dog. I'm not protecting my dog,
Mhm.
really. But if I do say something, then I'm upset when I say it, and then I'm carrying that upset
Into the ring. Yeah. So question being for those of you on Zoom, how do I deal with environmental or social stressors that are almost unavoidable in a lot of dog show scenarios, right? That's somebody who has a dog that shouldn't be by the ring, or somebody who has a dog that's way too close to your dog for what your dog needs, or other things like having a squeaky toy in the building. There's a squeaky toy going off in the background, right? Things like that. And the conclusion was kind of, how do I deal with this? Because if I do say something, it's in the moment, I'm already pretty pissed off because my dog's already, their attention has declined. I'm super distracted now. The last 60 seconds before my run, when I want to be focusing and I'm dealing with this, right? My frustration level is at an all-time high. I'm not going to be nice about it. Problematic. Because not being nice about it means that they're not going to be nice about it, which means that we're going to have this little conflict and my arousal level is going to be all out of whack going into the ring. I see it happens every single weekend. Somebody gets way too heated about something, way too heated. They start screaming at the gate, or they start like obsessively leash popping their dog, or they yell at someone with a kid, right? Because they weren't responding to the situation in a way that's going to make it better. They were reacting to the situation in a way that was emotional. A lot of people struggle with coming up with a clear, composed response in the moment because we're in that fight or flight mode. Our brain is not at clear and composed, even if you can be the most eloquent speaker in the world. And if you are in that high of an arousal state and you are flashing red, oh my God, I can't believe this person just stepped on my dog for the second time. I'm about to lose it. Something clear and composed is not going to be created for you. It's just not, right? What we want to do is have I call it pre-planned responses. So we know that these things happen. When someone is too close to the ring, the second I see that, I'm going to walk up and say, what? That can, yeah. Would you mind backing up? My dog's a little distractible. She's a baby. I know you understand. I appreciate it so much. Right? In a nice way. Right? Yeah. My Malinois is definitely going to need that. There's going to be a lot of times where I say, hey, he's a lot. I don't want your dog to be spooked by him. We're about to go in. Would you mind giving us a little extra space? I'd really appreciate it. Right? I hope you have a great run. Right? And if we approach things like that, and we say things like that, chances are someone's not going to say something shitty back to us, because I already said that I appreciate you. I already thanked you for accepting my offer that you have not yet accepted, but I'm conditioning you to think that this was a really positive experience, and I'm making you the good person. You, the person who's being distraction, are a good person. because I'm asking you to step away. And I know that as a fellow competitor, you're going to follow through on that. I'm making it about the safety of their dog. I'm making it about the comfort of everyone. I've done that at trials too. If we have spectators who do not know the rules of agility, yelling at them is not fair. They do not know any better. But what we can do is have a pre-planned response of, really good example I had, we were in an outdoor trial and it was a open jumpers run. I had a bunch of students in it and I was watching this family approach right in front of the weave entry. That was along the fence line. And I was like, this isn't gonna end well. I was like, these people are gonna get screamed at by somebody, right? Because somebody is gonna get to that red line point of, I'm so pissed off that they're there. My dog missed the weave entry because their kid has animal crackers, right? Right? Technically it's a training issue, but I understand that we don't necessarily want to put that stress on our dogs if we don't have to, right? So I went up and said, hey, we're so excited that you're here at the trial. We really love spectators. This is actually the hardest part of the course. It's gonna be really cool to watch, but some of the dogs really like kids. They might be a little distracted by the toddlers being here. Watching from over there will actually give you even a better view of the whole course, right? And I invited them to move to a better spot, right? And said, you can, of course, we're not going to say, hey, you can't be here, right? That's true. You can't be here. You really shouldn't be outside the weave entry, but let me make it into something that's positive for you. You're the good people for moving, right? We appreciate it so much, right? And if we can approach things that way, or if someone says something, they come at you really hot, you didn't think you were doing anything wrong. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate it. And just step away, right? It's really easy for us to react in the moment, but I want to come back and check in with myself. If it doesn't matter in 5 years, am I going to spend more than 5 minutes on it? Am I going to have a screaming match with this woman and have a board hearing at the AKC trial because her dog was too close to the ring? Is it worth the extra 4 hours of my day to stay here longer because this person's being ignorant? Or is it better for me to just go, oh, wow, okay, I'm going to avoid you in the future. I hope you have a fantastic day. And just move on. Right in the moment, we're not going to think about that. So we have to have some of those boundaries, some of those responses planned so that I can act in my best interest, so I can advocate for my dog. So when we get to a point of no return, that's when we're going to be reactive, not responsive, right? Can I answer your question? Yeah, excellent. Yep. Absolutely. Right, asking someone else. Support systems. I'm really big on having a support buddy, whether that's your coach, your spouse. He's invaluable, especially when something's going wrong. Yeah, right. Yeah, having someone else create space for you. Right, if you have a really crowded. We did that at Westminster when it was in the indoor. My mom took a lab, and it was very, very tiny hallways. People right up on top of each other. The lab needed space. She was a teensy bit reactive. She's kind of a funny dog. She didn't really like people up on top of her. She was a really big girl too. She was a 24-incher. So what we did is we had people walk alongside the dog, right? The dog trailed behind the person, so the dog no one first, right? And we had people parallel the dog. So we had the dog boxed off, right? The only way the dog could go was backwards, which it wasn't going to do because it was walking to the ring, very happy, right? Focused on its chicken. But instead of getting to that situation and having a conflict every 10 feet, we said, okay, what can we plan to do to mitigate this? Even if it feels a little bit extra, right? I'd rather go the extra mile and not worry about it than get into that situation and then have to deal with it, right? So having support people that you can rely on, right? Or even ask, like, hey, I think this is going to be a problem. Do you have any ideas about what we could do, right? And project with someone else, right? Another comment? Okay, cool beans. So let's talk about controlling our thoughts. So we have a few different strategies that we're going to take a look at. The first one is taking a reality check, right? Which we've already talked about in regards to shifting our understanding of how complex this experience is, or how difficult this experience is. Usually you can tell if you're exaggerating something if we trip into always or never language. If I'm talking about something as this never goes well or this always happens, number one, it's probably not true. And number two, it's really not a good headspace because it's definitive now. I've said that this is how it's going to be forever, right? It's much better for me to stay in a more flexible headspace and say, how can I rephrase this, right? Even if that's our start lines are a work in progress, right? Or my dog's still getting ring experience. right? I don't have to lie to myself and say this is going to be perfect, but I do want to stay away from the extreme language. Let's bring it back to something that's a little bit more in the middle, a bit more moderate of a response. I often tell people that if you're setting expectations going into a big event, let's set a high expectation. What's the best outcome that we can have? But let's also set a low expectation. What's the worst thing that can happen? Because if you end up here and you're 10% from where you wanted to be, if that's it, this is our comparison, we're gonna feel really shitty. If I say, this is what I got, this is where it could have been, I feel pretty good, right? I got a lot more out of this than I would have necessarily thought if I'd only set a high expectation, right? So giving yourself that leeway before you do an event to say, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? How am I going to evaluate myself during this event? And having the awareness to check in when you're evaluating yourself unfairly and saying, okay, wait, let me reevaluate the situation. Let me reevaluate my capabilities or my dog's capabilities. Also something we've talked about before, right? Practicing gratitude. Really great way to get our head in the present moment. We can only focus on gratitude statements if we're actively engaging with them, right? And one of the fun things about gratitude statements is we're making a list, actually engaging our brain a little bit more than just coming up with a thought. Because if I say I have to come up with 10 things, I have to come up with 10 unique things, which means I'm taking up space in my working memory that might otherwise be playing with thoughts of worry or thoughts of doubt, and saying I have to remember these things that I'm talking about till I get to the end of this list. So it's a good way for us to reset our thought process and get back in the present moment. I'm so grateful my dog has so much enthusiasm for the sport. I'm grateful that I have someone supporting me here. I'm grateful that someone's videoing me so I can watch my run afterwards. I'm grateful that it's a nice day outside. I'm grateful that the trial ends at 1 o'clock and I get to go home, right? Yeah, also, anything like that. Doesn't have to be anything specific. You could give yourself a category, like great gratitude statements about my dog, gratitude statements about my coach, about the people who are supporting me, gratitude statements about my day, about my life overall. I'm so grateful this is my hobby, right? Anything that's going to help you trend in the right direction about what am I focusing on, what am I prioritizing. Our other type of thought controlling tactic would be to give ourselves a mantra, right? Something we're going to say that's going to help us get in that headspace or that physical state that benefits our performance. So some of the ones that I like that I've used in the past are eyes on my dog, connect and commit, send and go, right? I was working on delivering. We can have mantras that are specific to certain pieces of equipment that we're working through or certain challenges that we're working through, right? If that's trust my weave entries, because I just spent 6 months retraining them. And now is the time that I just need to have confidence in that. What can I say to myself that's going to remind me, number one, of how I want to feel, and number two, remind me of what I need to do to support our best performance, right? Any examples of mantras that you might currently use? Look ahead. Yeah, that means something specific. Mm-hmm. The big picture. Yeah. Has a dual purpose. Yeah, I like that. And very often mantras do for us, right? There's an in the moment purpose, and then there's the big picture purpose of what do I want to be doing throughout my agility journey? Yeah.
Yeah, with my dog.
Stay connected. Yeah.
But it's for me to.
Yeah. Support every obstacle. That's a good one too. Yep.
Support every obstacle.
Yeah. And another one I like is work every foot. So I don't want to take any spaces on course for granted. Sometimes on the easy sections we check out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what did you,
Yes.
how did you say?
Work every foot. Yeah. Right. So one of the things we want to think about is when we're distracted or overwhelmed, we stress more. Mantras are giving us something to think about that's shifting your focus towards what matters. We're blocking out potential distractions, things we could be thinking about otherwise, and we're boosting our confidence. There's a lot of really good benefits to having some of these quick statements at the ready. You know, a lot of people who write them on their wrist. I know a lot of people who put them on sticky notes in their car. or sticky notes around their house, right? What do I want to remember that I should be prioritizing in this moment for this performance, or throughout the trial day, or throughout my dog's entire agility career, right? Having some of these as your go-to, if we start thinking about things we shouldn't be thinking about or that are detrimental for us to be thinking about, having thoughts that I can come to, right? Because in the moment, we're not going to create them. Our head's already in that negative headspace. These need to be pre-planned so that I can just draw from the bag and say, I don't want to be in this headspace. I'm going to focus on this thought instead. This thought makes me feel really good from my dog's training, or this thought reminds me of all the work I've already done, or this thought reminds me of how I can support my dog's performance. Okay. And then on the flip side, we also have tactics for controlling our physiology, right? So that's deliberate breathing. We've already mentioned a little bit. We talk about deliberate breathing. It's helping us control how we're actually responding to a physiological reaction. So if our sympathetic nervous system is responding and we're going into that fight or flight mode, diaphragmatic breathing is a great way to slow our body's reaction down, get our heart rate back under control, get the frequency of our breathing back under control. And it only happens in the moment. So it's a great way for us to regulate our emotions, regulate our thoughts by focusing on deep breathing. When we talk about deep breathing, we're looking at that deep bellows breathing. There are lots of things we can think about throughout deep breathing. We can think about the physical sensations, right? So how does this feel to feel my lungs expand and decompress, right? Just focusing on the physical sensation. We can also focus on some sort of specific counting scheme, right? I'm going to breathe in for this many counts. I'm going to hold it for this many counts and breathe out for that many counts. You cannot count and think about other things. Very convenient, right? We could also do deep breathing while we say our mantra, right? There's lots of ways to play with this. Not necessarily, none of these are necessarily for everyone, but it is something that we can be actively incorporating into our pre-performance routine, right? What am I doing the minutes before I go into competition, right? Or using this other times where I feel stressed to regain a little bit of control over my physiology and set myself up to go in a better direction from there. We can also use grounding activities. So a grounding activity is something that's going to bring us back to the present moment rather than thinking about the future or ruminating on the past. So this is a really easy one. And we are going through our 5 senses. So you're going to find 5 things that you can see: a blue water bottle, a green exit sign, the green reflection of the turf in the arena, a floral water bottle, right? Things around the room that only exist right now. I'm going to go through 4 things that I can feel, like the clothing, the pressure of my legs on the seat, the position of my feet, how my ponytail is pinned, right? Things that I can actually feel right now. 3 things that I can hear, right? So whirling of machines, your dog barking, your heart beating, your own breath. 2 things that we can smell, right? And 1 thing that we can taste. If we're in a competition setting, sometimes going through all of these can be a bit much. Doing just 1 of each, I consider to be a nice little check-in, again, to just bring us back to the present moment. If we start to notice that we're focusing too far on the future or too much on the future, and we're focusing too much on the past, we need to get back to right now to set ourselves up for success. This is a really great way to do that because all of these things only exist in the present moment. So by definition, I'm forcing my attention to come back to right now. Now I'm here and now I can have more mobility about where to go next and what to think about next, right? I get to make a choice. It's not happening to me. I'm hitting pause and saying, okay, this is the situation. What do I want to do with the capabilities and skills that I have, right? Right, yep, grounding activities are things that bring us back to the present moment. If we're overwhelmed, distracted, or flooded, really good go-to. And the last thing we want to think about in terms of managing our stress is controlling the controllables. There's lots and lots of things outside of our control. These, in general, are the things that are within our control, right? So thinking about our time, right? How long do things take? How long do I want to give myself time for? How do I set myself up to get an adequate amount of sleep the day before? Am I packing my food and my water, right? Am I planning on taking breaks throughout the day? These are all things that we can be doing for ourselves to help us reach an optimal state and not waste excessive amounts of energy throughout the day, right? A lot of people get caught up thinking about the uncontrollable things. So whether the trial environment, the course design, your competition's performance, the fact that you don't like this judge. Well, thinking about all those things doesn't get me anywhere because I can't change any of these things. They're outside my control. So all I'm doing is wasting energy and time on them. Energy and time that I could be investing in things that benefit my performance in the long run, right? Or benefit my experience at the dog show, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to go home and be like, that was fun. I want to do that again. We don't want to get home, cry ourselves to sleep and go, oh God, why did I do this? I have 3 more entries this month. Really, that's not why we do dog sports. But a lot of people end up in that kind of burned out. This was so stressful for so long. We lose the joy of the sport, right? Focusing on the controllables helps us recapture the enjoyment of being here, reminds us of what our values are, what we're prioritizing, right? Taking care of ourselves, taking care of the dog throughout the day, right? At the end of the day, if I focus on my controllables, I at the very least can be satisfied that I did everything in my power to set us up for success, even if it didn't go my way, right? If I spend the whole day focused on other things and I neglected my dog care, I didn't drink water or eat food till 4 p.m. I spent all day standing on concrete and my feet are sore and I didn't take any breaks and my eyes hurt because I was in the arena the whole day. Well, I feel terrible and it's largely my fault, right? And that makes us feel guilty and shameful and bad for being wrong or not being as effective or thinking I should have done this differently, right? Very often when I get to the end of the trial day and I did everything I possibly could to set myself up for success, I can be content with that, which means it's much easier to find closure even after a bad performance, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, a lot of people lose track of some of these things, and doubling down on what's controllable for us makes a really big difference in the big picture of how we go throughout our experience. So when we're thinking about practicing any of these strategies, or if you have other strategies that you've been using, we want to think about consistency. So we're using our skills regularly, even when we're not feeling nervous, right? So just because I don't need the mental skill right now does not mean that I should not be using it still, because there's still a benefit there. Even if I'm not completely freaked out, there's still benefit to deliberate breathing, right? In terms of optimizing our performance. So what we want to think about is, what can I be doing on a regular basis that's the same in training, that's the same in competition, right? Because if I can do that and recreate it, now it's much more likely that I'm going to use it in a critical moment because I have gotten in the habit of using these skills, right? We also want to set a goal for how many times I'm going to do this per week. It's not, we get a little dopamine hit from saying that we're going to do something, and our brain goes, oh, wow, awesome, right? So every time I think, oh, I'll do that, or next trial, I'll do that, or the next time I practice, I'll do that. Get a little dopamine hit. Our brain goes, yeah, you rock, right? We haven't actually done anything in this direction that's going to make a difference, right? So be careful of that. Don't just plan on using things, and then when push comes to shove, you either don't use it because you didn't think about it, or you can't use it because it's not developed enough to be usable in a competition situation, right? 2-3 times a week, check it off for yourself. Use your deliberate breathing. Use your mantra. Think about it during your training sessions. When can I be building this in, right? Even if that's just in the parking lot before you walk in for your lesson with your coach, right? We also want to practice outside of dog sports, right? These skills are applicable for reducing stress in all sorts of situations like driving. And if you are extremely reactive in other areas of your life, I promise you it is not helping with agility, right? So if you get caught off in traffic and you lose your marbles, right, and you're cursing up a storm, things come out of your mouth and you're like, wow, that was quite the combination. We are at a point where we have hit uncontrollable, right? That's a red flag for our agility performance, because that means that I'm not self-regulating throughout my everyday life, which means it's going to be way harder to self-regulate when it really matters. So using some of these moments as this is agility training, right? I stubbed my toe. How quickly can I regain my composure, right? The moment for me when I started working on that type of transferring these skills to other things in life, I dropped a glass jar of peanut butter in my kitchen. The dogs were in there. Glass went everywhere. The peanut butter went everywhere. And I removed the dogs from the room quite calmly. I didn't scream no, right? Everyone's backed up from the glass. I moved them out of the room and I was like, that was super unfortunate. And I cleaned it. And I got to the end of it and I was like, wow, that was really, there was glass everywhere. It was terrible. And I was like, but I didn't react, because really in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't terrible. But in the past, that would have been something that really frustrated me, right? Or something that I would have instantly screamed at my dogs because I was panicked about their safety because there was glass everywhere. And I have Shelties and they would eat peanut butter with glass in it easily. In a heartbeat, they would just swallow it and die later. Yeah, worth it to them, right? But I didn't react, right? I read the situation. The dogs had backed up because it made a loud noise. They weren't going for it. I had time to move them away without panicking, right? Can I create enough space in some of those moments in everyday life to use some of these skills or reevaluate the situation so that when I get to dog shows and it really matters and it's uncertain and everyone's here watching me, that I have the space and the awareness to say, I could respond better to this, or I could respond in this way that's really advantageous instead of reacting in this way that's really detrimental, right? Because we understand it enough, we understand what helps us, what hurts us, what's going to get to us, right? Because we all have some moment where our willpower breaks. Sometimes it's our interactions with people. Sometimes it's our interactions with food. Sometimes it's our interactions with sleep or distractions, social media, right? Figure out where your weak points are, right? Start working on them. There's no reason not to, and it's going to benefit our agility performance and your overall quality of life. So added perk to getting better at agility. Yes, it does. It does. It reduces our overall stress levels by a lot because we're not having that constant spike throughout the day. It also reduces our fatigue level throughout an entire day, right? If I keep my arousal level at a more moderate, more controlled, self-regulated spot, right? Right. So one of the things that you can do is ask yourself, right? Because again, we get to that level 10, we're not going to think about it in the moment. Take a moment, reflect on what non-dog related situations do I feel like my arousal level gets out of check? Do I feel ridiculously nervous or ridiculously worked up? That could benefit, these situations could benefit from me having a little bit more awareness and self-regulating with some of these skills, right? So that when you get into traffic, it's not crap, I'm in traffic. It's, ooh, I can work on deliberate breathing and see whether I can get my heart rate back down from 150 because that guy just cut me off. And I have my dogs in the back of my car, I'm pissed, right? Because that's me when I drive. The dogs are in the car, I'm way more angry when people do dumb stuff, right? Because it's the level of importance. My dogs are in the car. You do not rear end me. I will come at you. I'm 5'2" and I will be scared, right? We get to that point. So can I catch myself before that and say, ooh, this is an opportunity to work on some of those things, right? When we're training our nerves, we want to think about how we can introduce stress for ourselves. So doing things outside of agility practice or outside of competition practice is fantastic. There's also things we can do inside of agility practice, right? So we can look at hyping up our environment. We can make things more exciting, right? Music, people cheering, other dogs barking, right? Adds a lot of sensory experience that gets us excited, right? And then we can practice managing our arousal level because I've artificially increased them, right? Same thing with adding distractions, right? We used to do surprise mock parties all the time in my master's class. The surprise mock parties are very distracting, right? Everyone starts cheering and the people go, what? And they stop running because it was that easy to get their attention off of their run, right? So we can kind of proof through, just like we would with dogs by adding distractions around their weave poles, we can add distractions for us, right? Have someone randomly yell your name, right? You're probably not the only Linda at the dog show, right? But if someone yelled your name, are you going to dead stop running and look over and engage with them? Or do you have the mental fortitude to keep focusing on your dog and stay in the present moment, right? So we can test ourselves in that way. If the social evaluation comes in or the level of importance comes into our nervousness, we can increase our stress by videoing our practice runs and posting them. So if you're somebody who doesn't video very often, even just having the video camera out for a lot of people can put that pressure on them of this has to be right this time, right? If you're someone who videos often and we want to up the ante, promise yourself, no matter how this run goes, I'm going to post it on Facebook, right? And just hold yourself to that, right? Or do it with a training partner who you hold each other to it. I promise you, it will add a little bit of stress, right? And that the point is that then we get to practice dealing with that stress in a fake situation. Not in a real high pressure critical moment. I really want this run because it sets up the rest of my year, right? Let's get the practice, let's get the reps, the mistakes in this situation where we have more control over how much stress we experience, where we have more control over the consequences that come from failing to deal with our stress or making a mistake in how we managed our stress or arousal level, right? Some good examples for training. Any questions in regards to what we covered today? No? Good. So those in the chat are more than welcome to drop questions in the chat. If you have any follow-up questions, or if you come back and you watch this again, because you guys are going to get a link tonight to this video posted. If you watch it again or watch a certain section again, have a follow-up question, always feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to chat and clarify with you about what we were talking about there, about another example, about how that might work for you, etc. Right? Yeah, thanks for joining us. Good. Okay, I'm going to hit end on the record. Good. Okay, thank you guys on Zoom so much for coming. And I hope that you have a really great rest of your day. If you're joining us for the next session, I will see you in just a little bit.